Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks for a new day and for all the gifts and blessings that you bestowed on us in ways known and unknown. We thank you for the gift of following your son, Jesus, and being able to be his church and movement in this world. We pray your blessing on this time that we share in the work that we do and on the general convention that is yet to be, that when people see us, they see you. This we ask and pray in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Presiding Bishop. We're really delighted to meet with all of you by this great new technology that some are better at it than I am, but we'll do our best. And Michael Barlow, the Executive Officer of General Convention, was supposed to be with us today, but unfortunately, fortunately for the Episcopal Church, but unfortunately for all of us today, he is representing the Episcopal Church and the presiding bishop at a synod meeting of the Episcopal Church in Cuba, which is all part of our preparation for considering welcoming the Episcopal Church back into the Episcopal Church in Cuba, back after they left as a result of the 1959 resolution. So I think the way we'd like to start is if the presiding bishop wants to say a few brief words. I think everybody's already hopefully watched those scintillating videos by all of us. But if you'd like to say a couple words, then I'll say a couple words, and then how about we open it up to any questions you might have. Presiding Bishop?
Thank you, President Jennings. Well, I know the video, I'm sure that President Jennings and I will be receiving Oscars very soon for both of those. But it's great to be with you all and look forward to this general convention. I don't have too much to add that wasn't in the video, except to say that my hope and prayer is that this will be the emergence of a movement convention to see the movement of the Spirit in the church and how we can help to facilitate that throughout the church. This Jesus thing is real. The world needs us to be this Jesus thing and to be a way of being Christian that actually looks something like Jesus, which, to be honest, is contrary to much that is broadcast and presented as Christianity, especially in American culture right now. And so I think the Episcopal Church and our way of being Christian is needed. And so I hope this convention will be a spark for that, to continue that in our wider culture.
Thank you, Presiding Bishop. The President says ditto. I would like to recognize, before we take questions, that we have 6 senior deputies in Province 5. Senior is not anything having to do with age, but it has to do with the fact that these deputies have attended 7 or more general conventions. And I'll start from the bottom and go to the top. Bill Fleener from Western Michigan, this will be his 7th convention. Kevin Babb from Springfield, this will be his 8th. Greg Westergaard from Eau Claire, this will be his 9th. Debbie Stokes from Southern Ohio, and Newland Smith from Chicago, this will be their 11th. But the true victor in this is Dick Graybell from Northern Michigan. This will be his 14th general convention. And there's only one person who's gone more times, is Byron Rushing. So Dick Graybell, we're working on whether or not there might be a treatment program for you for this and for Byron and a few others. I also want to say thank you to all of the deputies in Province 5 who are serving as chairs, vice chairs, secretaries, and assistant secretaries for the House of Deputies legislative committees. There are too many of you to name. I don't need to take the next 10 minutes to do that, just to say there's a wealth of talent in the diocese, in the province, and I'm grateful to you for your leadership. So Heather, the great coordinator of Province 5, we're happy to take questions. I'm not sure who is going to start. We're in your hands.
Excellent. There was one that was emailed to you earlier. Did you get that email?
Yeah. Do you want to repeat the question? Do you want me to?
The one question that we have so far is, given that these are some of them, that there are some major errors and omissions in the worship booklets that have been included in the virtual binder, is there a plan for covering at least the significant ones, like lines of missing hymns?
My understanding from Presiding Bishop, all right, if I go ahead and answer this. My understanding from Michael Barlow is that his office, who actually didn't create the bulletins, but they are pulling them from the virtual binder, and the corrections are being made, and we're not sure exactly what happened, but we appreciate everybody's input. And you'll see on the General Convention Facebook page that Michael Hahn, who's the chair of that committee, canon to the presiding bishop, has put an explanation, apology, steps forward, and so I direct you to that page. And I think actually Bill Fleener from Western Michigan is the administrator of that page. It's called General Convention of the Episcopal Church. So we're working on getting that fixed, and hopefully that will be done in the next little while. Yeah. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. I'm waiting to see if anybody puts questions. There we go. Gray posted one in the chat.
Well,
what is it?
All right. And I need to obviously be careful. I want people to understand the question is a little more about the pros and cons of a salary for the president of the House of change the nature elect a president who is either retired or has independent means. So some kind of compensation would hopefully open up the position to any deputy of any age who feels called to serve. As a volunteer position, really only people who have other income can serve. It doesn't change if and that's an if, because the General Convention makes this decision. If the General Convention decides whether they decide to offer compensation or authorize compensation or not, it doesn't change the governance or the polity in any way. Compensation does not grant authority. Only the governing documents adopted by General Convention grant authority for a position. That means the Constitution, the canons, the joint rules of order of the two houses, the rules of order of the House of Deputies, and the bylaws of excellence. So I encourage you to look at the report and have conversations amongst yourselves and with your bishop. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I'd like to add to it. I would say that does this mean that the presiding bishop and the president would be co-primates? And I'm here to tell you, again, compensation changes nothing. We have one primate who is the presiding bishop and who is also our chief pastor, our chief executive officer, and the spiritual leader of the Episcopal Church. Nothing changes in that respect. The other piece is somebody asked me recently, if the president is compensated, does that mean as a DFMS employee that the president would report to the presiding bishop? The way our structure is set up at the Episcopal Church Center is everybody who is compensated is an employee of the Domestic and Foreign Missionary Society. But there are actually 3 offices, 3 departments, however you want to call them. One is the office of the presiding bishop. The vast majority of employees of the DFMS work in the office of the presiding bishop and report to the presiding bishop. The General Convention office, the head of that office is the executive officer of General Convention, Michael Barlow, and there are 7 or 8 employees who report to Michael Barlow. And my huge department, I have 1 employee, Betsy Bell, and she reports to me. But we are all DFMS employees, and we're all essentially on the same team, and we interact, but it would not change the reporting structure in any way. Presiding Bishop, do you want to add anything to this?
No, I think that's fair, and I think you pretty much said it all. You might say something about the budget placeholder.
Okay. When as you know, or hopefully you know, the Executive Council is charged by the canons to develop a proposed budget to pass to the Joint Standing Committee on Program Budget and Finance. And it was a phenomenal process in this triennium. And in fact, Steve Lane, Bishop of Maine, who is the vice chair of PB&F, said and he's been on PB&F, Program Budget and Finance, for 4 or 5 general conventions, said it's the best budget he's ever seen. I think it's one of the best budgets. First of all, it's balanced. It actually has a little bit of a tiny surplus, but it was developed in a partnership with interim bodies, with staff, and with Executive Council. The Executive Council decided through the Finance Committee, who's charged with the budget development, to put a placeholder for compensation of the president if it's adopted by General Convention. Because as we all know, it's much easier to take something out of the budget than it is to put something into the budget. The task force was not comfortable setting a potential salary for the president, and so they left that to Executive Council. Executive Council, through the Finance Committee, asked the Human Resources Department head, Raphael Sandak, at 8:15, to do a compensation analysis, which is what happens with every position at, that is basically to price the position. And so that was done through the HR. So what will happen is if General Convention decides that it wishes to compensate that position, which by the way is not only the President of the House of Deputies, but is also the Vice Chair of the Executive Council and one of the 2 Vice Presidents of the Domestic and Foreign Missionary Society, which is the corporate entity of the Episcopal Church. If General Convention decides to compensate the position, then the money is already earmarked. It's already in the budget. If General Convention decides not to compensate that position, then either PB&F will have that money to disperse in other ways, or it will remain there and Executive Council will decide what to do in terms of those funds directed towards other areas of mission and ministry or governance and structure. Great, does that answer what you were hoping to hear? I mean, you know, not in terms of, but I mean, have we answered your question?
Are there any drawbacks to this in the sense that does it make us less nimble or flexible in a time when we might need to be more nimble or flexible? We don't know. We're just wondering, are there any cons?
Well, I'm not aware of any, but, others, that would probably be a discussion you might want to have, especially when you get to General Convention, to be asking people or look online. Again, it's an important decision. I think the compelling reason too is I'm not coming up with any cons because I'm not sure of any. The con is that we won't be able to have younger people serve as president, that we are limited to a certain segment of the House of Deputies. I mean, to me, that is a con, that we have people in their 40s, 50s, early 60s who need to provide for themselves and perhaps families. So to me, that's the biggest con, is that the pool is greatly reduced. And other people may have other reasons why they think it's not a good idea.
And this is, I think this really is a good opportunity for the General Convention, but for the church through the General Convention, to have a thoughtful, intentional, missional conversation about what do we need as a church going structure and how do we support that. And I think that is a wonderful opportunity for this convention, and done prayerfully, thoughtfully, and intentionally, listening to each other, learning from each other. The convention will come out in a good and healthy place.
I see a question that says, is an executive council able to make the decision whether to compensate the PHOD? Executive council is charged with setting compensation for officers and key employees. There's some debate in one section of the canons, it says that the budget has to provide for, I don't have the canons in front of me, contrary to popular belief, I don't sleep with them. But,
don't believe it.
So one part, it says that the church is to provide for the stipend and necessary expenses of the presiding bishop, and in necessary expenses of the office of the to be paid by General Convention. And along that same line, Executive Council could make a determination, according to some, and it's all debatable, it's the Episcopal Church, that Executive Council could set a salary for office of an officer of Executive Council, and the president is, by virtue of being president, and Executive Council can also set compensation for an officer of the corporation. So we might need to clean up some of our governing documents. It doesn't say you can't, but it doesn't say really you can. And another question is, what kind of resources do you have now to do your ministry? The canon requires that the necessary expenses for the office be provided, and also that there be money provided for an advisory council in the same way that the presiding bishop has an advisory council. So I do have what we more generally call a council of advice. All the expenses of my office are paid for by the General Convention budget. That means my travel, office expense. I also have provision in, the president has provision in the budget for 2 staff members. I chose to have 1 staff member, Betsy Bell, who's the manager of operations and administration, and she is located in Cleveland. Many, if not most, of our employees are now remote employees. And instead of a second staff person, I chose to make use of that money to hire independent contractors, who do communications work for me. That's who helps with the newsletter, the website, and the various communication vehicles that my office uses. So the resources provided are certainly adequate, and I've not felt constrained not being able to do my position because there weren't enough resources. There are enough resources. What else would you all like to know? I mean, this is your opportunity. Here we are.
Well, so I'm waiting. Somebody sent me a message privately, I think meant to go to the whole thing. Does the President of the House of Deputies have a job description?
The job description isn't, yes. The job description actually is included throughout our governing documents. And what the task force on church leadership and compensation did was draw all of those canonical responsibilities into one place. So if you go to the Blue Book report on the task force on church leadership and compensation, you will see the position description there.
Thank you. And then in the chat, we skipped over it earlier because you were answering other questions, but Brian Coleman from Western Michigan asks, has anyone researched gun laws in Texas and determined whether or not we can prohibit open or conceal carry of handguns and other firearms?
You mean at the General Convention itself or generally?
I believe that it's for General Convention, but I'll wait till Brian confirms that.
I think it's, well, General Convention we can answer, that we're in a contracted space and we have certain kind expectations that are built into our contract and that allow us to make those determinations so that we are a gun-free zone, if you will, whatever the General Convention site is. That's contracted space. Now, as far if the broader question, I don't know the answer to that.
It was, I have confirmation, it was asking specifically about General Convention. So I think that contracted space answers that. Thank you.
Yeah. In Salt Lake City, we contracted with the convention center that it would be a gun-free zone, and there were signs at the entrances about that. And the same thing will be the case in Austin.
What other questions do people have? That takes care of the queue.
Oh.
So David Annis wants to know, whoops. Oh, there's a couple ones. Let me just say, the question is
can you read the question?
Okay, one of them is the PHOD a full-time position? I would say that 75%, I would say yes. Bonnie Anderson, George Werner, and Pam Chinnis, and David Collins, these are the most recent PHODs, would say yes. In fact, when David Collins was elected president, at the time he was the dean of St. Philip's Cathedral in Atlanta, and he finally decided he had to retire in order to be able to do the position of PHOD. I would say that 75% of the PHOD's time is spent in the canonical governing duties. 25% is, while it's not in the governing documents or in the canons, 25% of my time, I did a time study over 5 years, is spent in responding and accepting invitations from bishops to attend diocesan conventions, to various conferences with affiliated groups such as Union of Black Episcopalians, Nuevo Amanecer, the Asian American ministries, various kinds of groups who invite the president to come speak. I just was recently at the Association of Episcopal Deacons. So that's my opinion. With previous presidents who are still living. Somebody just asked, what are the prospects in the project for revising the Book of Common Prayer? I'm gonna pass that one to the presiding bishop.
What was that again?
What are the prospects in the project for revising the Book of Common Prayer?
Well, I don't think any of us knows exactly what a general convention will do. That's like trying to figure out what a cat's going to do next. So I don't have an easy answer. What I do suspect will happen is there will probably be some thoughtful exploration, I suspect, about what the church actually needs in terms of its common worship. That may be the real one of the real critical questions behind revision of the Book of Common Prayer, and where that will lead us, I don't know. I mean, just as an example, I mean, the Church of England, for example, the official prayer book is still 1662, and yet they have the Book of Common Worship, as well as other liturgical materials that are authorized, and they seem to function quite well with that. Is that where the Episcopal Church is heading? A similar kind of thing, where 1979 becomes 1662? I don't know. But that kind of thinking as to what does the church need in terms of its common worship at this time, is it a single book, and using book as a metaphor, actually, what does it need? I think that discussion is going to happen. I think the other part of the question will be, what is the status of liturgies that are authorized by General Convention, but that do not have the same status as the Book of Common Prayer? In other words, is there some way that we can have trial liturgies that don't have to be become part of the Book of Common Prayer, but actually would have the status of that, if you will, in terms of the life of the church, similar to the English model in other provinces, and the community do that. We may be heading in that direction, we may not. But I think it's going to be, if you want to get Episcopalians debating anything, give them liturgy and we'll debate it and have a full and vigorous debate. And I suspect that's going to happen at our General Convention.
Yeah. And that's the reason that the presiding bishop and I made two legislative committees. One, the traditional prayer book, liturgy and church music, but then we also have the committee to receive the report of Resolution A169, which was adopted in Salt Lake City, and charged the Standing Commission on Liturgy and Music to come forward with a plan. So that's, we just figured that would be better to separate those two out. The next question is, can anyone speak to Executive Council's Finance Committee decision as reported in the Blue Book not to create the position for women's ministries and networks? Let me just say a word about unfunded mandates and how Executive Council in its budget development is trying to address this. The resolution calling to create the position for women's ministries and networks was adopted after the budget was approved by General Convention. When there are funds are referred to the Executive Council for consideration. The issue is, if you create a position as required in this or called for in this resolution, then you have to reduce the budget in some other area. Now, of course, the presiding bishop can develop his staff, but even if he asks for new positions, he has to come to Executive Council and work with the Finances for Mission Committee to see where there is room in the budget to create such a position. Because this is a dilemma and has been a dilemma for some time, This time, the Executive Council's proposed budget that was sent to Program Budget and Finance includes, I think, well over $1 million in the budget that is not designated, so that the General Convention and PB&F during convention can say, okay, we think this is something through the hearings that is worthy, and we're going to go ahead and use some of that undesignated or unallocated funding for Resolution X. The other thing is there's a lot of work going on with a committee called the House of Deputies Resolution Review Committee, working with PB&F and with the legislative committees to get these resolutions that have funding requests out very early in convention. We adopt the budget, I think, on the 6th or 7th, maybe the 7th day of convention. If a resolution comes up the 8th or 9th day that has a funding request, it's too late. So that's the backstory on that. Do you want to add anything to that, Presiding Bishop?
No, I think you really have answered it.
Okay, the next question is, this is my first general convention. What do you wish someone had told you before your first general convention? Comfortable.
We're
both saying the same thing. Comfortable shoes. You'll see me in sneakers. Comfortable shoes. And I think the other thing I wish somebody had told me was, don't come to convention tired. You know how I always get crazy the last 2 or 3 days before I go somewhere and I'm running around. Spread it out so that you can at least arrive at convention somewhat rested. What do you want to add to that, Presiding Bishop?
I was going to say a seat on the pillow, but outside of that.
Okay. Here's another question. How will we receive documentation used at the convention? I had heard iPads had been issued to deputies in the past. Last convention, if Michael Barlow were here, he would tell you that we jumped 30 years in 3 years with our technology. Again, for the second time, iPads will be issued to all deputies and all alternates. Last time, I think it was only the first alternate. So if you're C7 or L8 and you're there and you have paid the registration fee, you will receive an iPad. There will be a mirror website that if you don't have an iPad, it's updated, a couple seconds after the iPad is updated. And everything you need will be on that iPad. Worship booklets, we pray, the Constitution and canons, the rules of order, and all the resolutions in real time. And I'll tell you what, the other thing I wish somebody told me was, believe it or not, read the rules of order of the House of Deputies. They were completely revised at the last convention, and I think they're much more user-friendly. So you'll get an iPad, and there will be help desks, even a couple located on the floor of the House of Deputies. And I think they've got a help person, or maybe more than one, in the House of Bishops. All right, is there? And we will also have orientation in both houses where members of the General Convention staff and our Director of Information Technology will be providing orientation. In terms of making notes, I just heard Michael Barlow answer this at the Province 3 Synod. The question is, what is the best way to make notes when we're using the iPads? Unfortunately, there's no way to make notes on the actual iPad issued to deputies, alternate deputies, and bishops. It would have cost, I think, something in the range of $100,000 to $150,000 to add that feature, and it was cost prohibitive. So your notes are gonna have to be whatever works for you. I wish we could do that on the iPads. We're just unable to do that. Heather, I think we've covered all the questions that are on here.
I think we have covered all the questions in the chat. I thought I'd give just a second. We're saving one important question for the end. So if other people have general convention questions, we would love to hear about that. Kathy says there's a question about the women's ministries.
Yeah, that was the funding. That was the question I was answering in terms of funding about women's ministries. So whoever put that in, they could put it in again, and they could do it, monitor that resolution and see that it gets hopefully dealt with much earlier in convention.
Excellent. Kathy, does that answer your question? Great, thank you. Okay, last chance, 15 seconds. Anyone out there? Okay, presiding bishop. I think that we have the most important question here for last. There are some questions about the royal wedding.
I think it happens next Saturday.
Excellent. So everybody's curious, but the specific question comes up as, how might you use this as an opportunity for the Jesus movement?
Well, I can assure you, the sermon will proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ, and the core message of Jesus will be articulated. That I can guarantee. Now, whether it's interesting or not, I can't guarantee you that. But Jesus is going to be in the message. And
Heather, everybody may not know what you're talking about.
Well, I guess it's public now.
It is public. I just checked.
Is it? Yeah, I've been, my feed here is going crazy, so something's going on. The presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church has been asked to preach at the upcoming royal wedding.
The crowd goes wild. We're so
yeah.
But I want you to know, the bishop, what the Telegraph says in London is the bishop, the first African American to be elected into the prestigious role, will travel from his home in Chicago, Illinois.
Oops.
Take part in the service. I didn't know you
I was
moved.
born in Chicago, but we left when I was. I mean, I suppose I could fly there and then head to Chicago.
I think it's terrific.
It's very nice. And there.
I'm not a morning person, but it means I'm going to get up very early to watch.
The president of the House of Deputies and I had a texting conversation about this last evening. And I had to consider that it wasn't doing an April.
I thought he was kidding me. I said I was going to call Homeland Security and the Attorney General and others to investigate the veracity of the name.
My wife actually had a similar reaction. She told me, "Get out of here, just go." Actually, I had the same reaction when I first was told. I did.
Excellent news, I think, all the way around.
Oh, there's a question. Will the presiding bishop be able to stand still in one place during the sermon at the royal wedding?
I think I'm locked in a pulpit.
Oh no!
Yeah, chained.
I see that another question has come up.
Yes.
There's a question wondering about the status of staff for environmental stewardship. Do you know about that, presiding bishop?
Yeah, the current budget, the proposed budget or draft budget has included, both at the request of the task force on environmental stewardship, a staff position, or it's not, I don't believe it's a full-time staff position, but a staff position to support the work of grants. The experience of the task force this last triennium was that the work of actually administering the grants that we have was more than volunteers could do. And so there's a position in that for that administration. The other thing that we have at present is that part of the portfolio of the Missioner of Melanie Mullins' position includes work in environmental stewardship and justice. And so we already have a part-time staff person who's engaged in that as part of the broader work of justice. But then there will be an additional part-time position for administrative purposes, primarily related to the grants. That's in the proposed or the draft budget that's coming to convention. And again, as President Jennings said, PBNF was really wise, and the Finance Committee of Council, in trying to have a pot of money, not for a feeding frenzy, but so the convention, if it comes up with creative ideas and there's energy behind it, and it will move the mission forward, to be able to try to fund some of those, whether it's women's ministries, environmental stewardship, or something else. And so we will have an opportunity to try to fund things that we think are important.
Here's another question. How will the election of Canon Michael Hahn as Bishop-elect of Rio Grande affect the presiding bishop's staff?
Well, it will affect it in, we're going to all miss him. I mean, that's the big impact. I mean, Michael has just been invaluable and has been one of the behind the scenes people and working with us in a variety of ways. All the culture work that we've done together, the revisioning the staff, all of the work, a lot of the work that we're doing, Michael's been at the heart of it. But the good side of it is he's given to the wider church in a new way, and the people of the Diocese of Rio Grande. So that's just a blessing. It's a blessing all the way around, but we're going to miss having him with us. On a practical level, operational level, we're going to continue with the position of canon for ministry within the Episcopal Church. But we're going to take a look at what do we need that position to do now, where we are at this point, because we're in a very different, I think President Jennings would say we're in a very different point than we were 3 years ago. There's been evolution, there's been development, there's been some just good stuff of how we work together, how the three offices work together, General Convention, President of House of Deputies, and presiding bishops, how those three staffs are one staff and yet three, sort of Trinitarian. Anyway, we've done a lot of good work there. So the question is, what do we need going forward, that position, particular position to be? I've found it invaluable to have those three canons, one for the ministry within the Episcopal Church, one for the ministry beyond the Episcopal Church, and one for evangelism, racial reconciliation, and care of creation, as three programmatic emphases of the church, but certainly of the presiding bishop. And so that has worked. The question is, what is the content? What do we need that position of ministry within the Episcopal Church to look like now? And so this provides an opportunity to look at that and then to search for the right person to do that job. And we'll do it.
I was thinking about applying.
Yes, you was. Wouldn't we make a wonderful team? We make a good team now. We have fun.
I don't see any other questions, Heather.
No, neither do I, and I haven't heard anything. Do you have any last words that you'd like to share with Province 5 before we sign off today?
the best province of all. Of course, that's what the presiding bishop says about Province 4. That's true.
That's true.
So we have a little thing going between 4 and 5. Just thank you for your many ministries, and I'm excited about seeing you all in Austin.
Thank you both for your time today.
And I ditto that.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great
God
day.
bless.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.